I arrived at Magnolia Crest on a mild spring evening, the air fragrant with the scent of flowers blooming in neatly manicured yards. The wide, tree-lined streets and freshly painted picket fences felt like something straight out of a postcard. But I wasn't here for the scenery or for a quiet retirement. I was on an assignment, albeit an unusual one for a Homeland Security operative. Officially, I was Anthony Carter, a mild-mannered logistics manager moving to a cozy suburban paradise with my wife, Natalie, and our two daughters, Sophie and Ava. We were the picture of a typical American family, from our station wagon to the new puppy that yipped excitedly whenever we opened the car door. Unofficially, I had been placed under deep cover to monitor suspicious activity rumored to be taking place in the vicinity of Creston Regional Airport, a major transportation hub only 15 minutes from Magnolia Crest. As soon as we turned onto Magnolia Lane and saw the elegant wrought iron gate emblazoned with Magnolia Crest Homeowners Association, I felt an itch of foreboding. An overbearing HOA can be trouble enough for an average resident, but for me, any friction at home could risk exposing my identity. I told myself to keep a low profile. No sooner had we parked in our driveway than I heard a sharp, decisive click of high heels on the sidewalk. A woman in her mid-50s, with meticulously coiffed auburn hair, strode toward us. She had on a crisp blouse, fitted trousers, and a clipboard that bore the HOA logo. Her gaze swept across our moving van, flicked to the freshly planted geraniums in the neighbor's yard, and finally landed on me. Her expression was polite, but her eyes sparked with an unsettling intensity. I recognized that look, someone used to being in charge. She extended a manicured hand. "Hello there," she said, her voice brimming with the forced warmth of someone who expects total obedience. "I'm Janice Arnett, but everyone calls me Karen." She flashed a tight smile, then added, "I'm the president of the Magnolia Crest Homeowners Association. Welcome to our community." I mustered my friendliest smile, shaking her hand. "Wonderful to meet you. I'm Anthony Carter. My family and I just got in." Her gaze flitted briefly to the half-unloaded boxes and the fact that my younger daughter had left her scooter on the curb. "We have a lovely neighborhood here," Karen said, arching a brow at the scooter. "We keep things orderly and safe. I'm sure you'll abide by our guidelines, detailed in the welcome packet." She thrust a thick binder at me, crammed with laminated pages. "Read it thoroughly, please. We have rules about parking, lawn maintenance, trash schedules, everything you need to keep Magnolia Crest beautiful." I gave a nod, ignoring the subtle jab about the scooter. "Of course, we'll do our best to follow the guidelines." She brightened, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Wonderful. If you have any questions, you know where to find me." Then she pivoted on her heel and walked briskly away, clipboard clutched like a scepter. I exhaled, exchanging a glance with Natalie. She mouthed the word Karen with wide eyes, and I shrugged. It seemed we had our neighborhood busybody, and probably the biggest threat to my cover if I didn't tread carefully. Little did I know that Karen's brand of control extended beyond petty HOA fines and into a much darker realm, one that would eventually collide with my real mission in ways I never imagined. Over the next week, I spent my days juggling new home tasks, unpacking boxes, assembling furniture, painting the spare bedroom, while also quietly starting my real assignment. Homeland Security had placed me here to keep tabs on Creston Regional Airport, specifically on rumors that certain extremist groups were aiming to disrupt local infrastructure. My orders were to blend into suburban life, gather intelligence, and report any suspicious patterns or persons. Magnolia Crest, with its close proximity to the airport, was a perfect vantage point. But from a purely domestic standpoint, life was complicated by the HOA's relentless oversight. Karen's binder of rules read like a legal code. The lawn must be cut to a precise height. Front yard decorations had to be aesthetically harmonious, and vehicles were restricted to a short list of approved neutral colors. If your mailbox was even slightly off-level, an official HOA notice would appear in your mailbox the next morning. The neighbors whispered about Karen's obsessive enforcement of these rules, telling stories about her late-night patrols, her habit of peering into backyards under cover of darkness. The second morning after we moved in, I found a bright pink slip tucked under my windshield wiper. "Notice, your garbage bin was placed on the curb 27 minutes earlier than allowed. This is a violation of HOA Rule 4.2. Please refrain from future infractions." I sighed, tucking it in my pocket. Karen wasn't wasting time. Natalie tried to laugh it off, but I knew these petty transgressions might escalate if we didn't keep on top of the rules. And the last thing I needed was someone poking into my life. If Karen decided to search public records or grill me about my non-existent logistics job, she could unravel my cover. Still, my training had taught me to remain calm. I introduced myself to a few neighbors, like the friendly couple next door, the Chins, who apologized for the HOA drama. They assured me that if you keep your yard tidy and don't antagonize Karen, life in Magnolia Crest was generally pleasant. They did warn me about Karen's intolerance of any changes that might affect the neighborhood aesthetic. Apparently, she once forced a family to remove a child's playset because the bright color of the slide was visually disruptive. I tried to imagine how someone so fixated on lawn ornaments could ever be involved in anything more sinister. Yet my instincts nudged me. There was something about her intensity that felt off. I'd learned in my line of work that criminals and conspirators don't always appear in stereotypical forms. Sometimes, they hide behind positions of respectability. My gut told me to keep an eye on Karen, even if my primary focus was on potential threats to the airport. One Friday afternoon, I drove to a local cafe called Java Haven to meet my Homeland Security contact, Special Agent Monica Gaines, for a routine check-in. We sat at a corner table, sipping coffee as we discussed the latest intel on possible extremist plots. Agent Gaines told me that suspicious transmissions had been intercepted, referencing disruptive actions at Creston Regional. She hinted that local sympathizers might be scouting vantage points near the airport, places like Magnolia Crest, for instance. We were just wrapping up when Gaines frowned at her laptop screen, reading an encrypted message. "That's interesting," she murmured. "We're seeing chatter about an individual known only as Astra. We believe they're embedded in the community, providing logistical support to a foreign extremist cell. Keep your ears open for anything referencing a code name like that." I nodded, my mind flashing to Karen's meticulously kept binder. Could Astra be some random neighbor with an extremist leaning? Could it be a code name for someone else entirely? With no other leads, I filed the information away, resolved to remain vigilant. That evening, as I pulled into Magnolia Crest, I spotted Karen standing at the corner, apparently waiting for me. She waved with a bright, forced smile. My pulse leaped. Had she followed me? Did she notice my repeated, seemingly random drives around the area? "Hello again," she said as I lowered my car window. "I wanted to invite you and your family to the HOA's monthly meeting this Saturday. We'll be discussing important improvements, and, well, we'd love to hear from our newest residents." I forced a cheerful nod. "We'll be there," I promised. "Thank you for letting us know." Karen's eyes flicked around, as if checking whether anyone was nearby. She leaned a bit closer. "You know, I'm very involved in community development, far beyond just Magnolia Crest. Perhaps you'd like to come to a smaller gathering at my home next week? We plan special projects and philanthropic efforts around Creston. It might be a good way for you to meet people who share certain interests." The hair on the back of my neck prickled. Her tone was coy, almost suggestive of a secret society. A hidden suspicion whispered in my mind. Maybe she was involved in something bigger than lawn care. I kept my expression neutral. "Sure," I said casually. "That sounds interesting. Let me check my schedule." She flashed a pleased smile, stepping back so I could drive on. As I watched her wave goodbye in the rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the impression that beneath her prim facade lay a puzzle piece for my mission. Or perhaps I was reading too much into a friendly invitation. Either way, I'd find out soon enough. The Magnolia Crest Clubhouse was a clean, modern building with tall windows overlooking a manicured lawn and a small pond. On Saturday morning, the large meeting room buzzed with chatter as neighbors filed in for the monthly HOA gathering. Karen presided over everything from a podium at the front, her voice amplified through a microphone. A large poster behind her spelled out the day's agenda, which included topics like landscaping standards, noise ordinances, and community outreach plans. Natalie and I took seats near the back, along with our daughters, who appeared bored after the first 5 minutes. As the meeting wore on, Karen introduced each item with meticulous detail, quoting from the HOA bylaws. Every so often, she'd direct a pointed look my way, presumably to see if I was paying attention or if I'd learned my place in this hyper-regulated environment. Just before the meeting ended, Karen announced, "There's one more initiative I'd like to discuss." something that extends beyond just Magnolia Crest. As many of you know, the economy around Creston Regional Airport is crucial to our entire county. But certain factors threaten our property values and quality of life. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on me. I'll be hosting a small workshop next week to share updates on how we can safeguard our neighborhood from outside disruptions. Anyone who's interested, see me after the meeting. A hush fell over the group, and I noticed a few uneasy glances among the residents. The older couple next to me, the Walkers, whispered to each other. The man shook his head in mild disapproval. The woman offered me a sympathetic shrug, as if to say, "This is how she always is." When the meeting adjourned, Karen approached me. "I hope you'll attend," she said softly, handing me a slip of paper. It listed an address, her house, and a time, 7 p.m., next Thursday. We'll discuss some confidential plans to preserve our community. We can't just let external threats ruin our property values. Right. Her smile was tight, her voice laden with a strange urgency. I nodded, pocketing the paper. My instincts told me that I needed to be there, that something about this workshop might connect to the chatter about sabotage at the airport. But was Karen truly entangled in extremist activities, or was she just a paranoid control freak who saw the airport as a nuisance? Either way, I resolved to attend. Maybe I'd find a link to Astra, or to the group rumored to be planning a disruption. Over the next few days, I tried to carry on normally. At the same time, I stepped up my quiet observations. I noticed Karen hosting small gatherings at her house almost nightly, with a rotating cast of about 8 to 10 people. They arrived discreetly, parking on adjacent streets to avoid drawing attention. One might have assumed they were harmless hobby clubs, if not for the fact that the visitors often left carrying folders or stepping into nondescript vans. My gut told me this was no typical community outreach. Natalie, who was in the loop about my true identity, offered her insights. "I've run into a couple of those people at the grocery store," she whispered one evening. "They talk in hushed tones, always glancing around. I overheard one of them say something about shipments and ensuring no interference. Could it be innocent, like local charities coordinating deliveries?" But I shook my head. Maybe, or maybe not. The mention of shipments sets off alarms for me, especially with all this talk about the airport. I'll keep an ear out. Thursday arrived sooner than I liked. I spent the day preparing for Karen's workshop, reviewing my cover story. As part of my official Homeland Security training, I carried a small concealed recording device, disguised as an ordinary key fob, in case I needed evidence. In my career, I'd infiltrated drug rings, illegal smuggling operations, and extremist cells. But this was the first time I'd done so in a quiet suburban living room, hosted by the local HOA president. At 6:55 p.m., I pulled up to Karen's house. It was one of the larger properties in Magnolia Crest, with a pristine lawn and a row of rose bushes curated to bloom in alternating shades of pink and white. The porch light glowed softly, and silhouettes moved behind the drawn curtains. I squared my shoulders, tucked my key fob into a pocket, and rang the doorbell. Karen answered, greeting me with a broad smile that didn't hide the tension in her eyes. "So glad you could make it," she said, stepping aside. "We're just getting started." Inside, the living room had been arranged with a circle of chairs. 5 other people were present, 3 men and 2 women, each looking guarded. On a side table lay various pamphlets about property value protection and preserving local communities. But the vibe felt more like a clandestine committee than a friendly HOA get-together. Karen guided me to a seat, introduced me as our newest, enthusiastic neighbor, Anthony Carter. Then she launched into an impassioned speech about outside interference, harming Creston's local economy. My skin prickled. The language she used matched the coded rhetoric I'd heard in extremist circles, albeit with a suburban spin. They discussed eliminating the threat from the airport, although they couched it in phrases like stopping expansions or derailing harmful developments. I leaned forward, feigning interest. My job was to remain inconspicuous and gather intel, but I could already sense something deeply troubling brewing here. As Karen continued her presentation, she clicked through a slideshow on a laptop. Maps of Creston Regional Airport appeared, along with diagrams of its runways and cargo areas. My heart thumped. This wasn't normal HOA talk about property lines or architectural guidelines. This was strategic information on the airport's vulnerabilities. Karen used innocuous terms like points of concern and areas for potential protest action, but I recognized the red markings on the diagrams. They were highlighting critical infrastructure. One of the men in the group, who introduced himself as Carlton, chimed in. We have the resources to disrupt the supply lines from the cargo terminals if it comes to that. We just need to ensure total secrecy. Karen nodded, glancing around. That's why I've been careful about who attends these meetings. We can't afford a leak. Remember, if this plan moves forward, it's for the good of our community. The noise pollution, the traffic, the pollution, it's killing our property values, and local businesses are suffering. We must take control and show them we mean business. Another attendee, a woman named Irina, suggested rallying local activists. We can stage a protest at the airport gates, maybe sabotage some ground equipment to cause delays, just enough to make the authorities reconsider expansions. My eyebrows shot up. Sabotage? That was no mere protest. These were criminal acts. However they justified it, they were talking about forcibly disrupting airport operations. The question was, who else was involved, and how far had they already gone? Karen tapped her laptop again, flipping the slideshow to a final slide. I have a potential partner who's promised support, technology, funding, and specialized expertise. But we're still in the planning phase. If they come through, we'll be unstoppable. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart pounded. Could this partner be a terrorist cell looking for local collaborators? Was Karen the link between them and the sabotage plot? I recalled Agent Gaines's mention of Astra, an embedded conduit for foreign extremists. The more I listened, the more I suspected that Karen, or someone in her circle, might be this Astra. At the end of the meeting, Karen approached me personally. Anthony, she said softly, I'm so glad you joined us. I see real potential in you. Someone who understands we have to fight for what's ours. We can't let outsiders destroy our neighborhood's livelihood. I shrugged, playing along. I'm all for keeping Magnolia Crest safe, I said. I just need to learn more, about how serious these expansions are. Karen's smile widened. You'll catch on quickly. And if you have questions, or if you want to help with the real grunt work, let me know. She patted my arm. You're exactly the kind of neighbor we need. I nodded, forcing a friendly grin. Inside, I was already planning how to escalate this to my Homeland Security superiors. This wasn't mere speculation about property values. This was an active conspiracy to commit sabotage, possibly linked to bigger fish. But I need more concrete proof before mobilizing an operation. That night, I detailed everything I'd witnessed in a confidential report to Agent Gaines. We agreed that I should maintain my undercover role but attempt to gather more direct evidence, documents, communications, or admissions of violent intent. The sudden presence of elaborate airport diagrams was alarming enough, but to request a federal raid, we needed indisputable proof that an actual terrorist plot was in motion. As days passed, Karen's group continued to hold clandestine meetings. I attended carefully, capturing snippets of conversation with my hidden recorder. The more they spoke, the clearer it became that they were coordinating with outside agents. Carlton and Irina frequently mentioned our offshore partners. Meanwhile, Karen remained the ringleader. She had the final say on who joined the circle, what actions they might take, and how money changed hands. Behind the scenes, I tested the waters to see if Karen herself might be the rumored Astra. I recalled the coded transmissions we'd intercepted. Someone in the area was feeding critical intel to a foreign extremist cell. One evening, I took a calculated risk and asked Karen directly, is there someone else? A sponsor? I keep hearing you mention big plans. Are you working with any group in particular? She gave a mysterious little smile. Why do you ask? Curiosity, I said, leaning forward as if I were enthralled by the possibility. If we really want to stop the airport expansions, we'll need serious resources. And it sounds like you have a pipeline. Karen's eyes danced with a mix of pride and secrecy. I've made connections with certain influential people. Let's just say they have every reason to want the airport compromised. They're not big fans of American aviation expansions, especially in areas that could serve as hubs for. She paused, then waved a hand. Well, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is, they'll help us if we do our part. Her words sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just an extremist domestic group. She was implying a foreign power or a terror network that opposed U.S. aviation for their own reasons. She might not label herself a terrorist, but by collaborating with them to sabotage national infrastructure, she was crossing the line into treasonous territory. After that conversation, I kept my distance, letting her believe I was still on board. But inside, I felt the urgency rising. My mission had shifted from quiet observation to something more imminent. People's lives could be at stake if Karen and her allies truly planned to sabotage Creston Regional. The time for caution was running out. Despite Karen's thoroughness, she wasn't a trained operative. She was just a suburban tyrant who believed in her own authority, underestimating the complexities of espionage and sabotage. That vanity proved to be her undoing. One afternoon, I was quietly doing yard work when I saw Karen hurrying out of her house, heading to her car with a leather briefcase in hand. She glanced around nervously. On a hunch, I jotted down the time and followed at a distance, using my phone's GPS to keep track of her direction. She drove to an abandoned storefront on the edge of town, parked behind it, and slipped inside. The place was in disrepair, windows boarded, a for lease sign half fallen off. Parking a safe distance away, I watched from my passenger seat. About 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up. Two men in dark clothing got out, scanning the area. Karen emerged, and they exchanged a quick handshake. One man passed her a small silver case, and in return, she handed over her briefcase. The transaction was brief, businesslike. My heart pounded as I snapped photos. This was a handoff, documents or money for something else. Possibly bomb-making materials or advanced sabotage tech. While I couldn't see what was in the silver case, it looked heavy enough to be equipment rather than simple papers. I sent the photos to Agent Gaines, letting her know we had probable cause that Karen was engaged in material support of a terrorist or criminal organization. Gaines replied that I should keep tailing her as long as it was safe. If we moved too soon, we risked losing the bigger fish. If we waited too long, they might carry out an attack. Eventually, Karen drove off. The men stayed behind for a few minutes, presumably checking the contents of her briefcase. Then they departed in the SUV, heading toward the highway that led straight to Creston Regional. The puzzle pieces were aligning. Karen's dealings extended into serious territory, likely with foreign entities wanting to strike at U.S. infrastructure. My job was to remain a silent observer, until we had enough for a warrant and a carefully coordinated raid that would neutralize the threat. The next clandestine workshop at Karen's house was the tensest yet. She gathered her inner circle, Carlton, Irina, and a few others, and excitedly announced that the final phase of their plan was approaching. She carefully worded it as our big day, avoiding explicit references to violence. But I recognized the undercurrent of menace. She showed a short video clip on her laptop. It depicted a blueprint of the airport's fuel supply lines, the cargo logistics route, and the main control tower. Diagrams highlighted structural weak points. She gestured to them, saying, "Our partners have identified the ideal places to create a disturbance that will shut down operations. We'll cause a chain reaction that will force Creston Regional to close for days, maybe weeks. By then, local businesses and developers will see that expansions are too risky." A man next to me, who had only been introduced as Alan, raised a concern. "But what about casualties? If we disrupt fuel lines or ground operations, people could get hurt." Karen's expression hardened. "We'll time it for minimal personnel presence. But we can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. This is bigger than any one individual. It's about preserving our community. Once we succeed, real estate values will stabilize, and we'll prove we're not to be trifled with." My stomach churned at her callousness. She was willing to risk injuring or killing innocent workers and travelers just to keep property values high. It was twisted logic, reeking of fanaticism no different from radical groups abroad. After the meeting, I quietly excused myself and slipped into the hall, pulling out my phone as if to check a text. In reality, I messaged Agent Gaines with an urgent update. They have detailed plans to sabotage the airport's infrastructure. Potential timeline, soon. Possibly within days. Gaines replied almost instantly. "We're mobilizing. Keep your cover a bit longer. We'll coordinate a federal sting." I took a steadying breath. A sting operation meant we'd have to catch Karen and her co-conspirators in the act or with definitive proof. I braced myself for the possibility that I'd have to confront them head-on. If Karen got even a whiff that I wasn't who I claimed to be, She could vanish or proceed with the attack prematurely. The stakes were climbing fast. As the tension escalated, my nightly check-ins with Agent Gaines grew more frequent. She managed to decrypt additional communications from the foreign extremist cell that seemed to confirm a local collaborator codenamed Astra. The messages described Astra as a trusted local operative with deep knowledge of the target area, facilitating sabotage efforts and funneling money into the operation. It was obvious to me that Astra had to be Karen. She had the means, the motive, and the control-freak personality that would align with such a role. However, we still lacked absolute confirmation, an indisputable link. Without it, we couldn't label her a foreign agent in an official capacity. Late one night, I waited for a text or call from Karen about the next step. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Sure enough, it was her, requesting a private meeting at the Magnolia Crest Clubhouse the following afternoon. Her message read, "We need to finalize details for the big push. High-level planning only. Don't be late." I responded affirmatively, heart thudding. If this was about finalizing the sabotage plan, maybe I'd get the evidence we needed. I emailed Gaines. "Meeting tomorrow, likely discussing final plan. We might have the smoking gun. Stand by for potential op." She replied promptly, "Got it. We'll have a tactical team on standby. Make sure your recording device is ready." The next day, I arrived at the clubhouse. It was empty except for Karen, who stood near a table covered with documents, her eyes shining with determination. She locked the door behind me. "We have a problem," she said, voice tight. "Word is that law enforcement might be sniffing around. Someone reported suspicious gatherings at my house. We must accelerate our timeline." Inside, adrenaline flooded me. If she smelled law enforcement, my cover could be at risk. I schooled my features, feigning alarm. "Are you sure?" She nodded briskly. "Positive. That's why we'll strike tonight. My foreign contacts are in place. They've transferred the last of the equipment to a location near the airport. We just need to show up and make sure everything goes smoothly. I need someone I can trust on site. You've proven loyal, Anthony. Are you in?" Time seemed to slow as I took in the gravity of her words. They intended to carry out the sabotage that night, likely under cover of darkness. It was a golden opportunity to catch them red-handed, but also incredibly dangerous. If the plot got beyond our ability to stop it, the entire airport could suffer catastrophic damage. I nodded with forced enthusiasm. "Of course I'm in. Just tell me where and when." Karen exhaled in relief, handing me a slip of paper with an address. 10 p.m. We'll gather at this abandoned construction site on the west side of the airport. From there, we'll move in with our allies. This is it, Anthony. Tonight, we make history and protect Magnolia Crest from that monstrous airport once and for all. I clutched the paper and forced a smile, all the while feeling the weight of what must happen next. The moment I left, I'd have to alert Gaines to stage an immediate federal raid. We had no time to lose. As soon as I exited the clubhouse, I dashed to my car and locked the doors. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed Agent Gaines directly. I relayed every word Karen had said, the location, and the time. On the line, Gaines's voice turned razor-sharp. "This is it. We'll mobilize SWAT, local PD, and our DHS tactical unit. Do not blow your cover yet. Show up as instructed. We'll be in position, and the moment you see them unveiling anything incriminating, we move in." I swallowed hard. "Understood. But if they suspect me, we'll have your back," Gaines promised. "Just stay alive. We'll coordinate with airport security to lock down the area, if necessary. We can't let them damage vital infrastructure. And we want Karen in cuffs, along with whoever she's working with." The hours crawled by as I prepared for the confrontation. I feigned normalcy around Magnolia Crest, hoping no one detected my anxiety. I told Natalie to take the kids out of town for the night, giving them some excuse about a surprise family emergency. I couldn't risk them being anywhere near the action if Karen decided to retaliate. Finally, darkness fell. At 9:30 p.m., I slipped into my car and drove toward the address. The roads were eerily quiet. I parked a few blocks away and walked the rest, maintaining a calm facade. My key fob recorder was switched on. Ahead, I saw the silhouettes of half-finished buildings, the so-called abandoned construction site. Dim lights glowed from inside a skeletal concrete structure. I approached warily, scanning for any sign of the DHS team. They'd be hidden, likely in unmarked vehicles or vantage points. waiting for me to signal. We had a code phrase. If I said, "Everything's set," it meant the conspirators were actively revealing weapons or sabotage gear, clearing the way for a raid. At the site, Karen greeted me with a tight smile, flanked by Carlton, Irina, and a couple of strangers who looked more like mercenaries than suburban residents. Several large crates sat in the center of the open area, each labeled with cryptic markings that hinted at foreign origin. My heart pounded as I recognized the language from certain Middle Eastern shipping codes. This was no ordinary cargo. Karen beckoned me closer. "We'll open these crates when our contact arrives," she said. "Then we'll load everything into a van and head for the airport's west gate. We must do it swiftly, before the graveyard shift staff at the airport picks up on any movement." I forced a nod, stepping nearer to the crates. I saw stenciled warnings about flammable or explosive contents. This was it, clear evidence of a major terror plot. My phone vibrated with a text from Gaines. "In position. Confirm readiness." I took a breath, about to respond verbally. But suddenly, bright headlights washed over us. A vehicle rumbled in, an unmarked black SUV. The same men I'd seen weeks earlier stepped out. They glanced at me suspiciously. Karen quickly intervened, saying, "He's with us. We can trust him." They nodded, then popped open the crates to reveal rows of small canisters with wiring. My stomach churned. These looked like portable explosive devices or something similarly destructive. Karen let out a triumphant laugh. "This is it, folks. We plant these along the fuel lines, sabotage control cables, and within minutes, Creston Regional will be in total disarray." I mustered my composure. "Everything's set then?" I asked, letting the phrase ring out clearly. "We can move as soon as you're ready." She gave me a feral grin. "Yes, we move in 10 minutes. No sooner had Karen uttered those words than the night exploded with flashing blue and red lights. Shouts rang out, "Federal agents! Drop your weapons!" A flood of heavily armed DHS officers and local SWAT teams poured into the construction site from all directions. Chaos erupted. The men near the SUV reached for guns, but officers tackled them to the ground. Karen let out a shriek of disbelief, turning to me, eyes wide. "Anthony, what?" Before she could process my betrayal, a DHS agent pinned her arms behind her back. She struggled, screaming, "No. This is a misunderstanding. You can't do this to me. I'm the HOA president of Magnolia Crest." Behind me, I heard a flurry of boots on concrete, crates being seized, handcuffs clicking. Agent Gaines stepped forward, bulletproof vest emblazoned with DHS, a sidearm drawn. She nodded at me in relief. "Good work," she said. "We got them all." Karen's glare darted between me and Gaines, her face contorted with rage and confusion. "You're with them?" she spat at me. "You lied to me." I exhaled a shaky breath. "I'm not a logistics manager," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "I'm an undercover Homeland Security agent. And you, Karen, just got caught aiding a terrorist plot." She thrashed as DHS agents restrained her. No, I'm just protecting my neighborhood. This is all for Magnolia Crest. I'm not a terrorist." But the canisters, the shipping labels, and the recorded conversation told a different story. As more vehicles converged, FBI trucks, local police cruisers, the scale of the operation became painfully clear. Karen's misguided, extremist plan to sabotage the airport had led her to partner with actual foreign operatives. Her illusions of being a righteous defender of property values collapsed under the harsh reality of handcuffs and criminal charges. The men who'd arrived in the SUV were also taken into custody, their weapons seized. Irina, Carlton, and the rest of Karen's loyal circle were lined up and arrested, disbelief etched on their faces. Some tried to run, but the perimeter was locked tight. They had nowhere to go. I stood amid the swirling lights, the night air thick with tension and diesel fumes. A swirl of relief, adrenaline, and exhaustion washed over me. The sting had succeeded. No bombs would detonate at the airport tonight. And Karen's reign of terror, disguised as an HOA crusade, was over. In the following days, Magnolia Crest was rocked by the fallout of Karen's arrest. The news outlets ran sensational headlines. Local HOA president charged in terror plot, suburban sabotage foiled, and so on. Photos of Karen being led away in handcuffs circulated widely. Neighbors gathered on sidewalks, whispering in disbelief that the same woman who fined them for letting their roses grow too tall had secretly plotted to blow up part of the airport. The shock extended beyond just the neighborhood. Creston Regional Airport officials thanked law enforcement for averting a disaster that could have caused millions in damages and endangered countless lives. The mayor of Creston issued a public statement condemning domestic extremism and praising the undercover operation. As for me, I debriefed extensively with Agent Gaines and the DHS team. They lauded my role in infiltrating Karen's circle and gathering evidence. The recordings I'd taken, along with the photographic proof of the handoff at the abandoned storefront, left no question of her guilt. Investigators confirmed that Karen had been funneling funds from a foreign terrorist cell, seeking to stage an act of sabotage that would cripple the airport's operations. The code name, Astra, was indeed hers, used in communications with the cell. Her twisted justification revolved around protecting property values and preserving the neighborhood economy. In reality, it amounted to a traitorous plan that threatened national security. The community reeled from the revelations. Many residents worried about the future of Magnolia Crest. Would the HOA fall apart? Would property values actually plummet after this scandal? The newly appointed interim president, a soft-spoken retired teacher named Marjorie Cole, tried to reassure everyone that the HOA would continue to function, but with a return to normalcy, free from Karen's iron grip. I found myself fielding an outpouring of gratitude from neighbors. The Chens left a basket of homemade pastries on our doorstep with a note. We had no idea. Thank you. Others simply nodded with quiet relief when they saw me. Despite my subterfuge, it seemed my neighbors were thankful the plot had been exposed before real harm occurred. Karen's trial commenced within a few months, capturing nationwide attention. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence: recorded phone calls, the seized crates of explosive materials, satellite images of her clandestine meetings, and my own undercover testimony. When I took the stand, I detailed my infiltration of Karen's group, how she confided in me about the sabotage plan, and the final bust at the construction site. Karen's defense team tried to paint her as a well-intentioned community leader who got in over her head, manipulated by foreign operatives. They claimed she was a dupe who never meant for anyone to get hurt. But that narrative disintegrated under cross-examination. My recordings captured her own words, nonchalantly dismissing potential casualties as a necessary sacrifice. And she'd willingly taken money and materials from a recognized terrorist organization in pursuit of her goals. The jury deliberated for less than 2 days. Their verdict: guilty on multiple counts, including conspiracy to commit terrorism, providing material support to terrorists, and attempted sabotage of essential infrastructure. She faced the possibility of life in federal prison. When the judge handed down a 30-year sentence without parole, plus heavy fines, Karen's proud facade finally cracked. She wept in the courtroom, protesting that she'd only tried to help Magnolia Crest. But the judge was unsympathetic, pointing out the gravity of her plot. The federal government also seized her house and assets, as they had been used to facilitate and fund terrorist activities. The same pristine property that once showcased her beloved rose bushes and boasted the largest lot in Magnolia Crest would be auctioned off, the proceeds partially allocated to victim restitution funds and law enforcement resources. In the end, Karen was escorted from the courthouse in an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled. Her eyes were vacant, as though she still couldn't believe the outcome. The harsh clang of the closing courtroom doors marked the final note of her downfall. With Karen gone and the extremist threat neutralized, Magnolia Crest entered a new era. The rumor mill continued to churn for a while. Neighbors gossiped about who else might have been in on the plot, which rules would remain, and how the community would move forward. Ultimately, the HOA scaled back its draconian measures. The strict binder of regulations was revised, freeing residents from Karen's stifling micromanagement. Marjorie Cole, the interim president, gave a heartfelt speech one Saturday, standing on the very podium Karen once used to extol her paranoid brand of community preservation. In her gentle voice, she said, "Our neighborhood was misled by fear. We were told that external threats would destroy us, but in truth, the real threat came from within. Let's move on with compassion and common sense." Applause rippled through the gathered neighbors. I stood with Natalie and our daughters, relieved to see the community healing. My assignment was technically complete. Karen was imprisoned, her co-conspirators were facing charges, and the infiltration cell near Creston Regional had been uprooted. One sunny afternoon, about a month after the trial, Agent Gaines paid me a visit. We sat on my front porch, the kids playing in the yard. She sipped iced tea and asked if I was ready to move on to another assignment. I hesitated, glancing at the quiet streets of Magnolia Crest, at the modest but welcoming house we'd called home for almost a year. You know, I said, Natalie and I have talked, and we kind of like it here. Once the dust settles, we might actually stay. The girls have new friends at school, and the neighbors are good people. Magnolia Crest can be a real community when it's not under authoritarian rule. Gaines smiled. I'll make a note in your file. If HQ approves, we can let you remain in a part-time capacity. Just keep your eyes open. We always need vigilant citizens who can spot trouble before it escalates. I agreed, feeling a sense of satisfaction. For the first time, an undercover operation had led me not just to success on the job, but to a genuine place I could call home. In the weeks that followed, the memory of Karen's tyranny began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of unity. The magnolia trees that lined the streets blossomed in vibrant shades of pink and white, symbolic of a fresh start. Neighbors relaxed, no longer fearing a pink citation on their windshield or a scolding about the height of their grass. The newly revised HOA guidelines were posted online, featuring simpler language: respect your neighbors, maintain a reasonable standard of appearance, and communicate politely if issues arise. The fortress-like grip Karen once held over paint colors and trash schedules became a cautionary legend, told with a mix of disbelief and relief. Occasionally, the local news would run an update on the trial of her co-conspirators. The foreign operatives who collaborated with her faced international charges, and intelligence agencies unraveled more of the network that sought to sabotage airports in multiple states. In all these reports, Karen was remembered as a suburban radical whose obsession with controlling her community led her down a path of treason. For me, life at Magnolia Crest achieved a strange normalcy. I'd mow the lawn on Saturday mornings, wave at Mr. Chin next door, and watch my daughters ride bikes along the sidewalk. I'd still have monthly check-ins with DHS, but they became routine rather than urgent. The specter of sabotage no longer lurked in the background. Sometimes, new neighbors would move in, hearing only fragments of the HOA Karen saga. They'd laugh in disbelief at stories of how an everyday suburban woman nearly caused a national security crisis. But those of us who lived through it understood. Extremism can wear any face, even that of a seemingly harmless homeowner in a tidy cul-de-sac. Whenever I pass by Karen's former house, now owned by a peaceful family with a golden retriever, I'm reminded of the day we all woke up to the realization that illusions of safety can be shattered from within. I think back to the final moment I saw Karen's eyes, wide with shock as she realized I was an undercover agent. Her misguided dream of protecting the neighborhood ended in federal prison, her home confiscated, her legacy ruined. Yet Magnolia Crest thrived, forging a path beyond her shadow. And in that quiet, tree-lined suburb, I found not just a successful mission, but a real place to put down roots and raise my family. Ever watchful, ever ready to defend the community from threats both foreign and domestic.